Thanks for joining us, Mark. And thanks for sharing this film with us tonight. Obviously, the first question to start off with: How did you hear about the place? How did you get interested in Juarez as a city?
I heard they had nice beaches there. No, I read about it. I read a book called A Mexica by a journalist called Ed Villami, who writes for the Observer newspaper. And in that book, there's a chapter called The Human Junkyard, and it's about the asylum. And there was a photograph in that book by a Juarez photographer called Julian Cardona. Great photograph, very enigmatic, and it was some of the patients were hanging blankets in the desert on creosote bushes. And I got in touch with them, and they said, "Well, come and visit." So I went there with a camera, and I stayed there, and yeah, that was in August 2011, and I think actually I was writing to somebody today who suggested that I might pick an easier project next time, but and I see the point, but I think if I'd been a cook and I'd gone to a place like that, I probably would have wanted to cook something. But if you're a filmmaker, of course, you're going to be wanting to make a film, because I had open access to the place, but along with that came a big responsibility, and also a lot of challenges, and it was a very hard film to make, to finance, and to get to this point where we are now. But it's just something you've got to do, really. So it's quite strange. You don't really have a choice. So you find something like that, and that's it. It's kind of like it's found you. So off you go.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, finding something easier to do. I mean, some people have said there's also like a certain theme maybe to your work of fear, like there's the one in South Africa you've done, and now this. So, it's again this sort of conversation about how we're looking at people, how we're looking at others that are surrounding us. Is that something you actually go out and try and find these sort of themes, or is it more just a story that sort of naturally comes to you?
No, well, I did a film in South Africa which was about quite an isolated community of white people, and I specifically focused on them. It's where my mother lives, and they were very consumed by their fears, and their fears basically involved nightmares around, pretty much, was to be specific, black men coming to kill them, steal their rape them, steal their belongings, whatever. And some of it is grounded in truth, but like most fear, though, it's completely exaggerated and out of control. And some of them were really trapped in it, and some of them actually couldn't give a toss about it and embraced it. They couldn't care less. So there was a spectrum of how people responded to their fears, and I thought that was a lot more interesting than talking about race. Which I find it just a bunch of constructs, really. With fear is far more emotional, it's far deeper. And then I read about Mexico, and I thought, how do people live in a place like this where it's just so violent, people don't even call the police, because the police are likely to come and kill you because they work for the criminals. So yeah, I mean, I don't know why I'm interested. Well, I'm interested in this because I grew up in South Africa, so I have an interest in the place, and then that led me to I've only been to Juarez in Mexico, so I haven't been to the nice beaches or where you have tequilas and whatever. And it's funny because I can't really. I'd like to perhaps one day, but I can't really imagine being a tourist there after having witnessed that. And I think the difference between those characters and the people in South Africa was that the people in South Africa were living their fears, living their nightmares, but a lot of them were victims of it, whereas these people were living out their nightmares on a daily basis, their trauma, really. That's how it expressed itself, and somehow dealing with it in their own way, as you saw in the film.
If anyone's got at any point questions they want to ask as well, just do throw them in. There we already at the first one.
I was just wondering, I assume that you probably came up with lots of ethical issues. Could you talk a bit about that, if that was the case?
Yeah, I'm not big on morals and ethics. I just go by what feels right, I think. And this has come up a lot, and I knew it would from the first day I filmed there. The first day I filmed there on that patio, I was scared because I've been told a lot of these people were murderers, and they'd done things that you wouldn't even imagine when you get told the story. You thought, I never thought someone could do that. So extreme things out of your imagination, and also somebody could walk up behind you and break your neck, and they wouldn't even know they'd done it because a voice had told them to do it, and then they'd forgotten about it afterwards because the voice had stopped talking to them. So I was a bit scared, and then, I just hung around, and nobody killed me, and nobody attacked me. I had one complaint in 3 different shoots there from one guy who spat near my foot because he was annoyed with me. That was it. And so, yeah, maybe I was lucky that nobody killed me, but this is how you deal with fear, I think. You don't let it consume you. But along with that, with that need for me to overcome that fear, because I started off being a tourist like anybody would, but I wanted to break through that. And because most people who go there, they'll spend an afternoon there. Like a TV crew, Al Jazeera will come there for 3 hours, make their film and out. And just from the stretch of time you spend there, that's not enough to deal with your feelings, your responses. So you spend more time there, your feelings change, they change they get used to you, and it all changes. So, but along with that comes a huge responsibility, and I thought, how am I going to? Well, when I first came back with 30 hours of footage, I was exhilarated by what I'd filmed. And I thought, well, how am I going to explain this to people? So I cut an hour, and some people said, well, this is quite disturbing, and other people said, you might need a story. So then it became a lot more difficult, because I had to go back, I had to find a story, I had to develop Joswe's story, I had to shape it into
That's
a
a good point. How did you find and how did you come across all these characters, which surely all have incredible stories?
Well, he was very articulate. I mean, a lot of people there were very hard to speak with, because, like, for instance, some of them a lot of them were damaged by drug abuse. So they'd blown out their minds with methamphetamines or coke or crack or whatever. So you can't really have a conversation. You just get streams of consciousness. So you couldn't really interview people in the normal way, and Josue was very reflective, and I think he did use it as an opportunity, like people often do with filmmakers. They use it as an opportunity to spill the beans, to tell you their story. But he was a poet, so he was like, he wasn't just somebody getting through his trauma, or using it as some kind of therapeutic exercise. It was the way he said things, and it came very easily. So, and then there was this whole thing about his daughter. So it just started. If I hadn't have met him, it probably would have ended up just being a straightforward, observational, kind of quite an old-fashioned documentary that would have been useful for academic research. And that cut is actually on the DVD. And I still think it's a really interesting film, but ethically it's problematic. But I think in a way ethics should be problematic, morals should be problematic. We don't live in a world that's good and bad. It's nonsense. So, and we should be. I think documentaries should make us a bit uncomfortable. How can you go to? There's so many things happening in the world that are horrific. So why should everything be comfortable? And I have had media types, industry people, broadcasters, whatever, say, "Oh, this is exploitative." What they're really saying is it's making us. It might make the audience feel uncomfortable, so we have to censor it. Because I think I can safely say it's not exploitative, unless anybody wants to say they think it is. It's fine, I don't mind, but audiences generally have said it's not. So, but I struggled with that. I mean,
Well, yeah, I think to a certain extent, there's always the issue. I think when you're venturing into mental health, where's this? When can people give consent even to be filmed and to agree to be part of this documentary? But
well,
yeah,
you can't.
No, you can't. I think so.
So
If you still want to face the issue, which is I think inherently obviously part of the project, we are as the audience are facing the people there in this community as much as the city is, which is, you know, as one can even see from the documentaries, it's obviously not in the city centre, it's on the outskirts. I believe it's actually quite close to a scrapyard.
Well, it's
and
an
things like
autonomous
that,
community. I mean, in as much as they more or less run it themselves. You know, it's run from donations, goods in kind. It's very ad hoc, hand to mouth. The pastor doesn't feature much in the film because he was a pain to film. He was a grandstanding preacher, so whenever you've got a camera on him, he just started making speeches. So, you know, he's an evangelist. So he was a hard one to film, and there were other issues as well. But he just goes out and tries to guilt trip people into giving things, and that's how he runs it. But otherwise, it's the exact opposite of how mental health care is normally. And in fact, the biggest donor on the crowdfunding campaign came from a mental health nurse who works at the Maudsley, because he said we never get to see people in situ, mentally ill people being mentally ill, you know, and that's of great value. So that was a compliment, really. And yeah, I mean, I think it's problematic when you're told that. And I screened it in Cork and Ireland recently, and a mental health worker said, well, she thought she didn't agree with the film because of consent. And of course you can't get, I mean, I did get consent, a blanket consent, but you can't get consent off a person who's mentally ill, who doesn't know what their name is, or, you know, can't cognify these things. So does that mean you cannot see people who are mentally ill? That's what she's saying. You can't have that, you know. So we don't get anywhere. We don't learn anything. We don't see anything. So I completely disagree with that, and I think it's it doesn't allow filmmakers to accept the challenge and to deal with it, you know, or photographers or writers or whatever.
Can you talk a bit more about the recent experiences that you had of screening the film, of showing it around? Because I think at one screening, I think it was the Glasgow one, there was also a couple of people, actually, you could consider patients, I think, watching it, you said? Or, you know, and then sort of them experiencing basically what the reality is like in a different part of the world.
Yeah, people who've been in institutions really like it. And I took it back to the asylum in June, and that was strange. It's something I always wanted to do, and I had always had a dream of showing it under the stars in the patio, putting up a big screen, and you know, having a kind of outdoor screening. But it wasn't quite like that. But we did get a screen. We got good sound and everything. We did it properly, and we didn't get everybody because some people were ill, some people had died. Some people just weren't in the right state to sit still for 72 minutes. But the ones who did, I think they liked it. The whole point was that it was an affirmation. I think for them to see themselves on the screen was great. I mean, the funny thing was Josue, because he didn't know what to say. But I thought if anybody made a film about me, I probably wouldn't know what to say. You know, I mean, I'll probably be a bit embarrassed, but, you know.
Are you still in touch with him? How is the relationship?
Yeah, I am. In fact, I've just sent them a couple of DVDs, but it's kind of difficult to maintain contact because the pastor has control of the internet there. He has control of everything, really. So it depends on what side how friendly you are with him at any point. And he's very hungry for money, and I'm just a skint filmmaker, basically. So I gave him everything I could. But there was never enough. It is never enough. You know, it's a bottomless pit. There's 120 people to feed there 3 times a day. And anybody who comes there, especially gringos, you know, what are you here for? Well, you know, give us some money if you're here. So it's difficult because he doesn't quite understand that the film might raise money. It might generate interest in a different way. But it's not for me to criticise how people operate there. It's a very different place, you know.
Sure. Any more questions at this point? Yes, Paul.
First of all, congratulations. It's a really magnificent piece of work. It's really uplifting, and it's you know, I think Werner Herzog would like it. You know, it's really a good piece of work.
His producer let me down.
Well, there you go. What can I do? But I was watching it and thinking, that 72 minutes went really quick. So do you think you could have a longer cut sometime?
I wish the editor was here to hear that. No, it's I've got to say it's, and I said this at the time, and I made sure there was a little part of my brain where it was branded in there with a hot iron. 3 months from January to the beginning of May, no, till nearly my 50th birthday. It was April. We were doing 13-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts. It was so mind-boggling because we would show rough cuts and really thinking we'd got somewhere, and with a select group of editors, directors, people who know about films, and they'd sit there and say, "Oh, we don't get it. It doesn't make sense." So it was bewildering. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I tried to cut it because I can edit. I've cut lots of films, and a lot of the sequences I cut, but I couldn't structure it. I couldn't do the story, even though I knew it was a classic narrative as old as the hills, a hero's quest. It's a Bible story, and I couldn't put it together. So that's why I did the crowdfunder, got the editor in, which came through you actually, an recently graduated NFTS editor. She was cheaper, half price really, and there were tears. We fought, but we got through it. And I'd be happy to do other cuts. But the big thing that I learned from her, and I think she was absolutely right here, is that the place is hard, it's harsh, it looks like that right from the start. And I had a lot of other footage that was a lot harder, for me a lot more enigmatic, a lot more ambiguous. She said, "You're just going to confuse people, it's hard enough, you're going to put them off." And I think she was right, but I got revenge because they're all on the DVD.
Well, it looks very elegant. It really looks. There's a lot of beautiful shots there. The photography is really spot on. The sound's great. It's just good and well balanced in all areas. So
Yeah, thanks.
I think we've got one more over there.
How you doing, Mark?
Charlie.
Deep film, very deep. Music makes you feel a lot, really. And I'm wondering why. I love the music, but I'm just wondering why you put it in there, because it sort of makes you feel a certain way, asks you to feel a certain way, I think. You see what I mean? And that there was plenty of music without the music, you see what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, and there were lots of discussions about that, and I ended up putting it in and making it heard. There was a mix where it was very low, you hardly heard it at all, and I ended up thinking, well, there's so little of it, I want it to be heard, and yeah, it does. It kind of makes the feelings bold, and it's pretty much always focused on Josue. So yeah, that's the way I went. But music's one of the hardest things with films, to get the balance right. And to be honest, between you and me, no one else can hear this. I'm not 100% sure about whether or not there's too much, or it's to do with levels. It's to do with the mix. I think it's fine. I've got to live with it now. I'm not going back to the mix. And there actually is a 5-1 mix, but unfortunately we couldn't sort it out tonight. So you just heard the stereo mix tonight, which is fine. But the 5-1, obviously, it's all around the place. So.
Hi, again, thanks. It's just really, I thought you said you kind of go with what you feel. It does show in the film that you're kind of more a very feeler sort of director. But I want to know, the last time I saw it, you said that you're having certain difficulties getting it, distributed, and people sort of respond better to it. What's happened since then? Has that been a similar thing, or has there anything changed in terms of just progress, general progress, or?
Well, yeah, you saw it. You came to a screening at Goldsmiths last November, wasn't it?
Yeah,
so
and then there was the
it's a year ago.
Ed Vellini.
Ed Vellini. Oh
yeah,
no.
That one as well in the
Frontline.
London.
No, there was that one. Did you come to that one as well?
I did, yeah.
Oh right. God, third time.
What's the latest?
Well, it has got better.
Yeah.
It took and any filmmakers out there, this is kind of useful really, because you make a film like this. I started off thinking, especially after the first trip, I thought, wow, to have access to a mental asylum run by its own patients, this is amazing. You don't see films like this. And then, so I went to a market to pitch it, to raise money with the media finance people. They all sort of looked at it. I could tell they were just put off by the dirt, the flies, the people, the lunatics, the whole thing. And they just didn't get it. And I felt very disillusioned, really. And I thought, well, maybe, as ever, my optimism is it's framed within in naivety, and that kind of carried on really until May this year, where finally a festival in San Francisco accepted it, and then it was just a small festival, but it gave me an excuse to. So I bought a ticket, I went out there, and then that gave me an excuse to go down to the asylum, show it there, and also show it in New Mexico. And because I realized that, because I had 6 months of rejections from festivals all around the world, especially American festivals, who I thought would find it interesting, because there's a lot of Mexicans in America, and obviously it's their neighbor and everything else. Nothing. And so I thought, okay, if I can't get into festivals, then at least I'll take it back to the asylum and close that circle. And then I came back, showed it in London, and you saw that one at the Frontline Club. And then I've got it into a few more festivals. And then it won an award at the Scottish Mental Health Film Festival in a couple of months ago in October. And actually, even though it's a small festival, it's great to get that award, because if PR types who work for TV stations want to tell me it's exploitative, then I just say, well, why would they give it an award? They know what they're talking about far more than you or I do. And the Lancet gave it a great review as well, and they know what they're talking about. So it just shows them exactly what they are. They're PR. They're absolutely full of shit. So that's what we're up against. And it's censorship. It's nothing less than censorship. They are gatekeepers, and they keep the gates shut. So they prevent people from seeing this. And maybe I should have known better, that this was always going to be as tough as it is. But I honestly didn't. I thought people were going to... I mean, I had Andre Singer, who was Herzog's producer, he enabled the great Fred Wiseman film Titicut Follies to be broadcast here in '92 on Channel 4. First broadcast in the world, first national broadcast. It's a film shot in a mental asylum in Massachusetts. It's really tough. It's a brutal film.
Yeah, I remember it.
And so I thought, so he was interested in this, but then their clumsy financial self-interest, the deal fell through, and we lost quite a lot of money that I'd actually raised, that they were brokering. So the little money that was on the table vanished, and then I did the crowdfunder. Then 2 European broadcasters came in right at the end. They give you the money after you've done the film, which is very helpful. And well, it's better than nothing. And then I don't think I'll ever earn any money doing this. And I know I was moaning about it last night to some friends. But actually, it's the support here and events like this to make it all worthwhile. And the film, the value of the film. And the DVD will sell. I know it's a unique document. I don't know if there'll ever be a film like this. A mental asylum run by its own patients, where you can film anything in an unofficial war zone. I mean, there might be more. It'll be a very small genre, though. But I know that universities will use it for research. I've written a book about it that my friend Paul here has kindly edited. So he read the book before he saw the film. And it will have life, it'll last a long time, and maybe that's just it, you just got to accept it.
I think it's a priceless achievement. I've not seen anything like it. But what do you think is the main problem? You said the PR, the gatekeepers. Is that the festivals, or is that the?
Well, it's anything that's market driven, because they don't want to offend anyone, scare anyone, and the first 5 minutes of that film can be seen as offensive. So I had a woman from PBS in the States. They're public service broadcasting. They're like the only kind of channel where you'll see long documentaries. And she said it was, we sat and watched it and we thought it was exploitative. So there was a long pause. I didn't say anything back. And she said, well, that's not quite the right word. Because she could tell she'd overstepped the mark and she hadn't really thought what the word meant. Anyway, what can you say? You can't argue, you know. But my favourite one was a Sundance Film Festival programmer who said that Americans have enough problems of their own. They don't need to know about Mexicans.
Only feel-good documentaries at Sundance.
That's a senior programmer at Sundance. I can't remember her name. It's not worth remembering. If I could, I'd tell you. But, you know.
I have a question. There's a personal question that I have for you. Because this is really have a big impact on you psychologically, did you prepare yourself before going and afterwards? How did you react to all of these strong things that you've seen, you know, like the people, the stories, like how did you actually find your balance? Like, okay, how did you face it before and after? Did you do some, I don't know, psychological course or something like that? I don't know, anything that could help you?
No, I got caught out the third visit when 6 people died in 10 days. The pastor was very aggressive with me because I didn't have as much money as he wanted, and most of all I was sick. The first day I got there, Josue was really sick, and I said, go to bed, take antibiotics, do whatever it takes, I need you up and running, I've come here to film you. And then I caught what he had, but I wouldn't take the same drugs because I didn't trust them, and I had to keep working. So I really felt like that place physically passed through me, and I was in a just terrible. I mean, I was going to bed with a fever every night, shivering. I had 6 blankets on me. It was really, really bad, and I just and people were dying. There was all this action, all this stuff going on. And it was hard to hold the camera, to be honest. I know this sounds a bit melodramatic, but it's not so much how I felt. The point is that I've been there 3 times. I was feeling this place. It was getting under my skin, literally. I couldn't go back. That was it. So that was it. That was a point of no return. I came back here. Took a while to recover, and then had to start dealing with money people. Editing. I had hours and hours of rushes that I couldn't understand because my Spanish isn't very good. I couldn't afford professional translators, so I got this trickle of translators, and some of the translators would say, I can't translate this, they're crazy. So I'd say, that's the point, I need it translated. So anyway, it took ages, it was very complex. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I was in an unofficial war zone, and like journalists who come back from war zones, they're traumatized. And I think part of the trauma is because you can't describe it to anybody, because no one understands they can't relate to it. You know, I mean, I couldn't relate to it when I was there. I said to Josue, people, because every morning we'd get up, there'd be another corpse, and I'd say, look, there's something wrong here. Somebody should do something. And he just said, well, they're just dying because it's cold. And I said, well, yeah, but I'm not dying, you know. I feel like I'm dying, but you know, and they said, well, we don't have anything. So it's very different, and that is like a war zone. You know, there's a war going on. What do you expect?
So it took you quite long to recover from this, right?
Well, I didn't realise what had happened.
Yeah.
And it's taken a long time, you know. In fact, writing the book, and that's why I had to write the book, was to talk about the wider story other than the film and all the different characters and all their stories, but also just my experience, to pass that on. Because I don't know if it'll ever happen again, you know. I mean, I didn't plan it like this, but it just happened. So it's very profound. But for me as well, the whole thing it's a learning experience. So it makes you it does make you a better person, definitely. You know, you understand the world better. And so then there's this need, okay, you got to tell people. I'm not saying you should all go to Juarez and hang out at the asylum, but I think one big thing, the theme I explore in the book is this theme of us and them, and how we are very conditioned to consider this us and them, and it's almost, maybe it's just intuitive or instinctual, or maybe it is conditioning. I don't know, but to feel that we're okay they're not okay. So there's us and there's them. So there's this dividing line. I mean, the guy who's sitting by the cash point, when you're drawing out your money and he's sitting there, maybe he says something, maybe he doesn't, but you pretend to acknowledge him or not. You pretend not to give him money or whatever. But there's an us and them thing. There's a line going on there, and it goes on. But that place, when you start spending time there and you sleep there, you realise actually it's not so much us and them, that I'm okay and they're not. Actually, how would I be if I was in their position? And I don't think I would handle it. I don't think I'd survive. So, I mean, when you hear the stories, you just can't believe they've got through it. And they smile at you, and they're happy to see you, and they get up every morning and they don't complain. So.
That's another question, perhaps. When you came back after completing some of the film and then coming back to the UK, what was that experience like? I mean, loads of politicians have been here talking about the NHS, and I think mental health, in particular, has been more of a topic in the last elections. Was there anything you reflected on, having just been?
Well, no, I don't have a special interest in mental health as such, but it's. And it's for me. It's. I mean, I'm interested in mental health more because it's about other realities, other perceptions of the world. That's where my interest lies. But yeah, I mean, we're all kind of, there's a blandness to the way these things are presented to us. To people outside, we're never told maybe we should be humbled by these people. Maybe we should admire them for what they do. I mean, there was a guy from the Wellcome Trust at some point I approached for money, and he said, well, we can't invest in anything that where a mental health asylum is run by its own patients. It's just not right. You need experts, like they can't do it. And that's why I mean, Josue's speech to the cops is so great because, and it could have been scripted that it wasn't. I mean, he took charge of that scene. Like a lot of scenes, he directed them. He's such a talented man, and but he told those cops, this is what we're doing.
And that just reminds me of what I wanted to ask you. How did that finish with the police? Because that was just a great piece of footage, but I wondered how it kind of came to an end. They were obviously making inquiries about how this whole setup was in existence. What was your interpretation of it, and how did it come to an end?
Well, there was a line we cut out. It was in for a long time, and then we cut it out in the end, where the cop looks at me and looks at Josue and says, they're filming you, they're going to make you look even worse, with the film. Because obviously he's got an assumption that, a man with a camera means, negative, a negative response to what's happening. Little did he know. And also, this is a city where, at the time, 8 people were being murdered a day. 8 people every day, a city the size of Nottingham, about 1 million people, and no arrests, right? So these cops are telling other people how to do their job. So you've got that kind of glaring elephant in the room. But actually, I think their vanity enjoyed being filmed, because it took them ages to comment on me filming. And I was wondering when they were going to say something. And they're all tooled up there, so they could just scare me off quite easily. But then afterwards, actually, I'd gone back inside, but they called Josue over to their van when they were leaving, and they said, actually, we admire you. We think it's quite amazing what you're doing.
Really?
That kind of hombre sort of chat off camera. But they were great. They were like from Central Casting, those cops.
There's another question right at the back.
Do you think Josue will ever get to California in that car?
Well, that was our little dream. No, I don't know. Okay, because there's on the DVD, folks. There's a story. There's a film which is Josue's story, which is an interview with cutaways. But there's a lot of his story that isn't in that film, because when he was 14, he jumped on a train with some mates, went across the line. It's very easy to do it. Ended up in Colorado in midwinter. He was trying to get to California. So they got on the wrong train, you can imagine. And then got on the right train, ended up on the streets in LA, got caught, the social worker says, let them go because nobody could be bothered to accompany them back to the border, so they're on the streets. Cut a long story short, he started hanging out with other people in a kind of mainly Hispanic neighborhood, lots of Mexican immigrants, got a taste for heroin, started doing errands for older guys, met Linda, Vanessa's mother. She got pregnant. He just carried on his itinerant ways, was in drive-by shootings. A nasty fucker, really. And then ended up, he got done for murder, and he did 10 years in San Quentin with Charles Manson. So it's great when you mention Charles Manson, 'cause then you know it's really serious. And then after that he came out, did the same, carried on his life, and then he got deported. So it's unlikely he can get back. I mean, with the right strings and some money, he probably could.
With this documentary now, maybe. Expose
Well, yeah, and there's been talk about the film, but he's very institutionalized. So he's been in prison a lot, he's been in that asylum, he's been in gangs. That's pretty much all he knows. So he's used to other people doing things. And it either happens or it doesn't. He has no control. And I think for it to happen, he would have to really get out there and, get that passport and, organise himself. Maybe he will. He's actually training to be a mental health nurse now. He's going to get his official papers and stuff. So he's doing it, He'll end up running that place on his own, I'm sure. So he's an amazing man. I think he's quite vain. I don't know if you picked that up in the film. I certainly picked it up working with him. But I thought, well, he's also a survivor, And there's this funny thing where his hand becomes this kind of trophy that he keeps holding up. And you don't know how many scenes I've got where he's talking about his hand. And there's a great one where he's talking to the co-workers and he's talking about death. And he's using all these biblical quotes and death coming in from Juarez and it's coming into the asylum and all these grotesque things. And then he starts going on about his hand and pulling off his fingers, and he makes the noises, and I cut to the guys' faces, and they're all like, ugh. And these men have seen shit, and Josue's kind of scaring them, and then he laughs, well, I'm still here, and so yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's vanity, but yeah, he's kind of earned it in a way, I suppose.
Great. Well, thank you, for being here, Mark, tonight. I think I have to wrap it up there, so you all have a chance to at least have one more drink at the bar and maybe chat to Mark in person. Thank you all for coming. There's our details up there. Please follow us for more of these kind of screenings and stuff. And yeah, thank you all.
And there's free posters here and DVDs.